It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk, Mississippi.
From the Foundation Studio right here on Biloxi's Back Bay, I want to welcome you to Super Talk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi, because we live in the capital of the outdoors in America. I want to thank you for joining us on the powerful Super Talk Mississippi Radio Network, on Super Talk TV at C Spire TV. But some of you watch the show on YouTube or Facebook or on your favorite podcast. It's October the 2nd, 2023. Hey, by the way, I say this every week. The views on this show are mine, not those of the foundation. You can bet on this. When it comes to outdoors and outdoors issues, you can really count on me to say what needs to be said. I'm an independent voice, and I'm honored to be in this position. I especially want to thank the sponsor, the title sponsor for Super Talk Outdoors, the foundation. The formal name is the Foundation for Mississippi Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. It's separate from the department. They're a 501(c) nonprofit. But this group financially supports a lot of efforts at both wildlife and educational projects for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And they are also from time to time focused on important issues like the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund that we had so much success about. And there'll be more issues as we go forward. And it's been great watching that organization evolve. I might also add they are stronger and more aligned today than they've ever been, and that's great to see that. By the way, I was up at the Mississippi Delta this weekend. It was a grueling weekend as we were planting. We actually use a no-till drill. We did some experimenting last year. We're all in this year with the no-till drill, and we're going to pray for rain now and hope in about 30 days we'll come back with some fertilizer. We'll time it before a heavy rain. I've had really good help from my friend Spike Crawford, who's in the seed business, and he's been advising me on seeds for many years. And he's also just a great guy. But I'm like a lot of you guys now. I'm praying for rain. I'm praying for rain because we got a lot of food plots out there that have been planted in the dust. And speaking of dust, when I usually get back from the Mississippi Delta this time of year, I've got a lot of Delta gumbo on my truck, and I've got to wash it off, and it takes a little bit of time, and it starts to get in my driveway, and I got to deal with that. Yesterday when I got home, I just washed the dust off. That's not a good sign. And you look forward. We got some cool air coming, but still, not big rain chances in the future. It's okay. It's okay for it not to rain, but when it rains, we got to get a sufficient amount, because if we don't, we're going to have some trouble with our food plots. I am thrilled today that we get to shift gears and talk to someone like William McKinley, head of the whitetail deer program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. And I've been waiting to catch up with William for some time now. He's a good friend of this show, a super dedicated wildlife professional for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and a good friend. How you doing, William?
I'm doing great, Ricky.
Yeah, you heard what I said, man. There's a lot of people praying for some rain right now, aren't they?
There sure are, man. I live here in north central Mississippi, and it is so dry right now. So dry. We're just below where a lot of the rains came through, weeks ago. So, but as you get even further south around the Jackson area, it gets even worse. It's dry.
Hey, my son asked this morning, as we start to see bucks start to come into camera view that weren't there before, he asked this morning that if the drought could have potentially affected antler growth. What's your thought on that?
Been asked that a lot recently, Ricky. And the drought really started kicking in. It basically stopped raining over in June. And so a lot of antler growth was already done by then, and you didn't see the real impacts of the drought until several weeks after that last rain. So antlers look good this year. Body conditions, not so much. But antlers are looking really good. But we caution folks, this drought is going to have an impact on deer next year. As they go into the winter in poor body condition, they may have big antlers, but a lot of deer will actually likely have smaller antlers next season than they do this year because of their body health this year.
Wow, that's really interesting. So it's going to be interesting. Hopefully, we'll start to get some rain soon. We'll have a sort of a normal situation. As I drove around on the farms that I manage for hunting purposes over the weekend, saw a few, a little bit of water in some of the sloughs, but man, the water was super low. I found no areas where there was any standing water, where we kind of normally have some standing water in some of the duck ponds and whatever. But boy, it's dry. It's super dry right now, isn't it?
It is. And so, you think about what's happening in deer's life right now. They're normally getting enough vegetation from what they eat, the bucks. Well, not this year. They're having to water bucks are more regularly. Does for the past 2 months since they had their fawns, they're nursing every 4 to 6 hours. So they're having to drink multiple times a day. So water it's normally not a limiting factor in Mississippi, but it is definitely concentrated deer this year.
Yeah. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Let's see. Well, two farms have a little bit of water near, but one has a lot of water near it. So that's probably a really, really good thing. Hey, listen, one of the things that's true though is that the farmers have really enjoyed these dry conditions for harvesting. The farmers, the Dunn family that I work with for the farms that I lease, they had one of the best harvesting years they've had in a very long time. I don't know if it was a record, but it's probably near a record. But this unprecedented dry conditions to harvest have been terrific, and we had a lot more soybeans and corn in the ground than we normally have. So does that tend to affect how the deer season is going to be?
Harvest was able to get out earlier. That's a good thing on the farmers. It does say there wasn't quite as much of those soybeans left out there later for the deer, but I mean, we're only talking about a few days compared to some years. But overall, harvest went really, really well. We were seeing people cutting corn, being done with corn weeks earlier than usual. So it's been a good year to be a farmer. They had rain up until, and then it got dry. So but anyway,
so we're in the early stages. So we're in the early stages of enjoying a velvet season now. If my memory serves me correct, we got a little over 360 deer last year, 368, I think, deer during the velvet season last year. How'd this year go?
Well, harvest was down. But the other states like Tennessee's the only other state I know of that has implemented a purely open and closed velvet season that just lasts for one weekend. Many states open while they're still in velvet, but 234, that's down quite a bit from last year, but it was new last year. More hunters, permits were down this year. Harvest was down. So, but it's still an opportunity, and it was some really, really nice bucks harvested during that season. We've seen the pictures. So,
well, that's cool to hear. I've always done a little bit of bow hunting. It's hard for me to bow hunt when it's hot, and my son Jordan was bow hunting Saturday morning, and he was getting attacked by mosquitoes.
Well, if you really look, the velvet weekend was actually cooler than our opening of regular archery this past weekend. So, over most of the state. So we did have that little cool snap by in the 80s there during that velvet weekend, and had some good deer movement. People that went saw deer.
People may not realize this, but the legislature won't let a season open on a Sunday.
That's correct.
Yeah. Has that always been that way?
It has been that way since well before I started, and it says in statute a season may not open on a Sunday. Hence the reason we opened deer season on September 30th this past Saturday. So the normal archery opener was one day earlier. That comes around, once every 6-7 years, depending how the calendar works out. So
very interesting. Very interesting. A lot of archery. I tell you, archery is a very, very popular sport. My son Jordan, he's really practiced. He's gotten super proficient. I mean, he can pattern really well at 55 yards, maybe even further.
Oh, wow.
The new technology that's out there. He's got a really nice Matthews bow, but there's some great technology out there, and people are really enjoying getting out there and beginning to sort of take in their enjoyment of the outdoors with archery. That's just always been popular, but it's even more popular today, probably, isn't it?
It is. We're getting more hunters, and crossbows are legal now, and so a lot of hunters who ordinarily couldn't use a vertical bow or chose not to were able to pick up a crossbow. But you're talking about youngsters getting in and that excitement. I've been an archery hunter since high school, and I shot at 13 before I got my first deer. I was shooting instinctive, and man, I would fling those aluminum arrows, and I was so used to gun hunting. If I saw a deer, it was in range. So.
Yeah, no doubt. Hey, listen, we're visiting with William McKinley, who's head of the deer program for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Hey, when we come back, we'll talk a little bit about, we had the heat and the freezes and all these different variables that are sort of adding up to, I have a question, are deer stressed in Mississippi? We'll ask William McKinley that when we come back.
Mississippi.
Leading the conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I'm visiting with my good friend William McKinley, who's head of the deer program for the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, and he's a real specialist. He helps us understand what's going on. As I mentioned before we went to break, we're talking about I want to ask you about, do you think that the herd could be stressed? But before we do that, let's talk about just overall. The deer population in Mississippi is it at an all-time high?
Our numbers, our estimates right now show it is either at or very near a record high for all time with the number of deer. Now, that doesn't mean every single piece, every acre in the state. We realize, there are places that the deer herd may be declining in localized areas, but statewide, we're dealing with a lot of deer out there, Ricky, and we're not dealing with the best environmental conditions to have a record high deer population.
Yeah, you worry about it. So look, for people like me who lease land, we own some land as well. But I probably, with my partners and me, we probably control about 2,500 acres. Mm-hmm. And what we see on those 2,500 acres is that we better get out there and thin the herd a bit. We need to get some does out. And that's a common refrain. I would even think on public land, as more and more people have become aware that if we pass on these smaller bucks, we're going to get to see bigger bucks, and people are more focused on that. We've got some work to do to thin the herd, don't we?
We do. And you can run a lot of deer when environmental conditions are good, but we as a state agency, my job's to look at it we got to keep that herd in check for when environmental conditions are not so good, like a drought coinciding with record high heat indices. You remember a couple of months ago, it's been a hot summer, and the summer stress period's worse on deer in Mississippi than the winter. So yeah. Deer are stressed.
And then you had freezes. I mean, yeah. Hey, listen, I've got palm trees that were just absolutely ravaged. Now they live, thank God, because I protected the core. But they're beautiful today. They've come out and finally recovered. But I can only imagine what the stress looked like across the state of Mississippi as a result of that hard freeze we had.
Well, here in North Central, so our trees, our oaks were leafed out and blooming when that March 20th freeze hit. It was 19 degrees at my house. It wilted them. They turned completely brown. All that fell off, and Green Up had to restart up here across much of Mississippi. Luckily for North Mississippi, the oaks in the extreme north, the oaks hadn't bloomed yet. So it looks like they're going to have some acorns, but this year, here around my house, the white oaks are bare. I mean, they have no acorns, and the red oaks, they bloom, set the fruit, and drop, the following year. So they're not going to have acorns next year. So we're looking at a very low mast year, and then couple that with a drought, Ricky. a lot of these trees, your water oaks and cherry barks, have acorns, but they're throwing a lot of them because of the drought. So food plots are going to be very, very attractive if we can just get that rain to get them to germinate and start growing. So,
well, you and I have not talked about chronic wasting disease in a while. I bet you're just as concerned today as you've ever been concerned. The reality, it's such a slow infiltrating thing, and the only thing we have to fight it is containment. But it's so troubling. I mean, you more and more experts are focused on it. More and more experts are concerned. I mean, they've said things like this is maybe the biggest risk to deer hunting in America. But it's slow. I mean, it's just slow developing, and because it's not sudden, and you can't go in there and just do immediate cure, and it gives people, the naysayers, the people who don't agree that CWD is a problem, it gives them an opportunity to say it's not that big a deal. Just let survival of the fittest deal with it. But I have friends of mine, and I won't say the areas, but in the areas where they've discovered CWD, and they've seen for the last 2 years a lesser number of mature deer, and you got to think that's what the impact's going to be. So if you're in an area that has CWD, and now suddenly you're not seeing as many mature deer as you used to see, that's what a CWD environment looks like. But anyway, what's your latest thinking on all this?
Well, it definitely shortens the lifespan, and we're seeing, just coming in through our taxidermists that pull samples, we're seeing far less 4-year-old and older bucks coming in out of extreme north, like North Benton County. Studies in West Virginia and Arkansas, some of the newer studies where they're radio collar and GPS collar and deer in their hottest CWD zone. So kind of look at it as a timeline. How long has CWD been in the area? Well, it's been there longer than it's been in Mississippi, and they're beginning to see population declines now. So that's big questions that a state has to answer. How long do you continue doe harvest in areas where the disease is taking out a lot of your deer? There's a lot of questions have to be answered, and our biggest control method is to try to find it early in the new areas and try to keep it from spreading. So we have to have CWD zones in place to do that. I know they're not very popular, but give you an example. MSU has started a research project where we're testing scrapes. Now, we can't do this wide scale. Lab capacity is small, but we tested some scrapes in the South Delta, and we found positive prions in scrapes 19 miles north of our nearest positive deer down there in Issaquena. So the disease is out there, and that tells us there was almost certainly a positive buck or more work in that area, almost 20 miles away from a positive. So we're finding these new methods to try to find the disease on the landscape, but we're still in the research portions of that. But the disease will have an impact. It's slowly spreading, and we encourage hunters to get their deer tested and help us to fight this disease, to we want healthy deer.
Yeah, I'm not drawing you into this discussion, incidentally, so just let you know that before I say this. But I've watched closely Texas and what's happening in Texas, and where you've had Supreme Court rulings. You got this big mess surrounding the sale and transfer of deer and breeding of deer, et cetera. But you've got a couple of recent counties that have CWD that pretty sure it came as a result of allowing the sale and transfer of deer. The fact is, when you have a disease like CWD, chronic wasting disease, and the only way to combat it is through containment, the last thing you want to do is start moving deer around inside a state, and Texas is one that did that. We know from other states as well. That's a big deal. But when I talk to my friends that before would say I'm not that concerned about it, they're more concerned now because they're reading more about it. They're watching videos, and a lot more people are talking about it now. And those states that have had a high prevalence of CWD, there's a lot to learn from them. We can go to them and see what the future looks like for Mississippi, and it's just kind of a scary proposition. Then you realize why some people say that it's the biggest threat to white-tailed deer hunting in the United States, and it's definitely true that it is, isn't it?
It is. It is. It is a huge threat. It's slowly, insidious is the word they use, slow and destructive, moving across the landscape. And so it's our job to find it and notify hunters if they're hunting in an area where it is, so they can choose to get that deer tested. And
yeah, so CWD is not the only thing we have to worry about. It's the one that's got so much. Again, the slowness of it is why it's hard to ultimately get your head around it. But you think about hemorrhagic disease or blue tongue disease, it's still that's an issue as well, isn't it?
It is, and we've been monitoring blue tongue hemorrhagic disease now for about 30 years in the state, and we've been on some really low years. It kind of cycles every 3 to 5, but it's a virus, and the deer that get it, and it only kills about 5 to 10% that get it. The rest of them are then immune to it after they get it and get over it. So, but we were kind of had some down years on it, and we got a fair number of reports of it this year, and especially in the northwest portion of the state. In fact, I've had 3 more reports since last night. But hunters are in the woods this weekend. Yeah. So people are out seeing things. So that doesn't mean it blew up this weekend. It just meant there were more hunters in the woods to see it. But they're finding some dead deer on the landscape. Had a beautiful 10-point sent to me last night that they had on camera the first week of September, and up in right in the edge of Quitman County. So they had a beautiful deer, and then they found him dead, and all signs point toward it was probably blue tongue. A lot of reports in that area just in the past 2 weeks. So,
wow. Well, it's part of the deal, man. Biologists are going to be involved in helping us understand it. We're always focused on how do we keep our deer herd healthy. Deer hunting in Mississippi is some of the most sought after hunting in the United States. That's one of the reasons we're the capital of the outdoors in America. But William McKinley, I'm glad we're getting into deer season now, so you're going to be back on my show on a regular basis.
We may have talked about some bad parts, but deer season's open, Ricky, and that herd needs hunting. Hunters, get out there in the woods.
Take a doe, man. Everybody should take another doe. We need to thin the herd for a lot of good reasons. Anyway, listen, it's been a pleasure, William.
Enjoyed it, Ricky.
You bet. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we're going to talk to Sarah Caylor about state parks. We'll see you after this. Mississippi. Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors as we listen to my friend Steve Azar, who wrote the theme song for Super Talk Outdoors, One Mississippi, which happens to be the state song for Mississippi. By the way, if you haven't seen the children's book that Steve and a wonderful illustrator has recently published, you ought to look it up. It'd be a great Christmas gift. But it's a wonderful salute to Mississippi and the diversity of this great state. And I'm so proud of my friend Steve. I can't say enough good things about that amazing dude. Hey, listen, I enjoyed that conversation with William, and now we're going to shift gears and move over to a new friend who I've had the opportunity to visit with before we started the show, Sarah Caylor, and you're going to enjoy getting to know her as well. Sarah, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really well. So you're an economic development specialist. We're going to get into what that really stands for here in just a second. As you and I shared some notes, you're big on quantitative analysis and economic development, and which is a really important thing actually when you start thinking about the state parks and what they bring to the table and how to justify where we're going to do improvements and where might we hold off, et cetera. Tough job, but somebody's got to do it, but thank God we've got the money to do it now, right?
Right.
So, Sarah, I was enjoying learning about you. You were actually born down here on the coast in Ocean Springs, and when you were 5, your mother got a job for DuPont that brought you to the Jackson area, and you ultimately went to Mississippi State. And it's interesting. I bet that 90+% of the employees in that building you're sitting in Jackson went to Mississippi State.
I think that's a fair guess. I haven't done the statistics myself, but based around game day disappointments and highlights, I'd say that's pretty fair.
Yeah, speaking of game day disappointments, or in this case, lack of disappointment, you can see I have my SuperTalk red on today, which happens to mirror Ole Miss. I didn't go to Ole Miss. My son went to Ole Miss Law School. I'm a Southern Miss graduate myself. So is everyone else in my family except my youngest son who went to Auburn. But anyway, yeah, it's a proud day in Mississippi with Ole Miss having defeated LSU. So a lot of happy people. I'm sure there are 1 or 2 Ole Miss people in that building, huh?
My director of state parks, his son, yeah. He's a fan.
Well, that's cool. Well, listen, one of the cool things about your story before we get into what you got your degree in and what ultimately led you to the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks is that you kind of enjoy the outdoors. You were telling me before we started the show that you used to take a ride down the Pearl River and find a sandbar, and then after some period of time, sort of out roughing it, you would actually row against the against the tide, literally, to get back up river. But tell us about it. What drew you about that?
Goodness, I guess a big part of it was freedom. I got a little Pelican kayak for my 18th or 19th birthday, it was Christmas, and I went out in the freezing water like on Christmas Day with this kayak. I was so excited, and ever since then, yeah, I would just kind of do these Bear Grylls survival weekends on my own terms, pack a couple of apples and granola bars on my fishing gear, a small tent, kayak about 3 miles down the Pearl, leaving from the spillway, set up on a sandbar, sustain myself with granola bars and anything I caught, and then 3 miles back up against the spillway and get home.
Well, what's embedded in that story, first of all, is a love of the outdoors and an appreciation for that. It's not always about hunting and fishing, even though I know that fishing is part of it. But in that story is kayaking, enjoying the outdoors, just in general, foraging. You do some foraging. You actually you say that you're a amateur entomologist. Where did that love come from?
That's a great question. So I guess I should start off by saying I have 2 pet tarantulas. That's just a little side hobby of mine. I got kind of into spiders to get over my fear of spiders, and the more I learned about them, the less threatening they became. And just a deep dive of YouTube videos, and then adopting my own arachnids, getting to know other community members, attending reptile shows, things like that. It just, I don't know, built into a love, and now I'm the bug person at work. I don't have a degree in it. That's why I say amateur entomologist, but if there's a bug in the building, someone's sending me a picture for identification.
You know what's interesting about your degree? I think you said sociology. I took a sociology class in college. I have a sense of what it's all about, and then as a publisher, obviously spent a lot of time thinking about it, sociology. But then you went on to really zero in on quantitative analysis. Those 2 things don't usually go hand in glove. What is it that brought you to quantitative analysis?
Something about statistics in college clicked super hard for me, where it didn't exactly make sense in my little, 17, 18 teenage brain. But I started doing a couple of research projects in undergrad, surveying Vardaman, Mississippi, which is the sweet potato capital of the world, wrote an undergrad thesis on it. And after a while, I was like, should I pursue this? Like, I'm kind of good at it. And one thing led to another. I got a teaching assistantship at State and got my master's and just followed it all the way through. I figured numbers would get me somewhere, like better than just a regular sociology degree, like being able to publish data.
Well, when you got out, it led you to the state parks eventually. What is it that attracted you to the state parks?
Yeah, so you already know I'm a bit of a outdoor recreational enthusiast. How's my audio? Looking a little shaky. Good. But yeah, I'm an outdoor recreational enthusiast. I've been attending summer camps at Roosevelt, camping out the floors. I knew this job had its perks. I didn't know how cool the perks would be. Like, for instance, if I'm not in my comfortable air-conditioned office, I get to be out at a park enjoying the day, but also getting some work done.
That's one of the things I enjoyed about being a publisher of a newspaper was you never know from one day to the next how it was going to change. I mean, you had your business responsibilities, you had your editorial responsibilities, but I loved getting out in the community and being engaged and having some freedoms to be able to do that as a CEO. But you strike me as the kind of person that would probably shrivel up and die if you had to just sit in an office.
Yes, very much so. I love getting out and like not only seeing my state parks, but also getting to like talk with legislators, meet with community stakeholders. How can we better this system? I'm social almost to a point of it being a flaw. I can't stop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, listen, man, what's important about what you do, Sarah, is there is a lot of stakeholders. There are so many stakeholders that are involved. I mean, the general public and people who care about state parks, people who go to state parks. You got all the people inside the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. You got the Mississippi legislature and our state leaders and the business community. Listen, a lot of people are concerned and want our state parks to reach their potential. I've had a number of conversations with the Speaker of the House and Lieutenant Governor, who both have been incredibly supportive of the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks when it comes to funding millions and millions of dollars to try to step it up. We went too long, didn't we, without investing money in our state parks?
I could not agree more, if I'm being honest. I'm super excited to be a part of the administration that is receiving more attention, more funding, and I can't wait for us to completely revamp this whole system.
So there is so what comes with this money is a sense of responsibility, which means then you guys have to do an analysis. So you think about the business plans that you've done for Paul B. Johnson and Percy Quinn and Natchez and Roosevelt and Clark Cove. It's important. So we had, in order to know where you want to go, you got to know where you are now. So you got to do the current analysis, and then you have to see what is possible and what would it cost to reach that goal. You've been doing a lot of that, haven't you?
Good bit. Yeah, you're correct. I'm in the middle of creating 5-year plans for Paul B. Johnson, Percy Quinn, Natchez, Calarco, and Roosevelt State Park. Those are our priority parks. You'll be seeing the most changes with them first. The rest are sure to follow, but we just wanted to really hit on these and get like a good spread of pretty full renovations at all these parks. But yeah, the data analysis part is lovely as well.
Well, we've already begun to see what that could look like with some of the renovations that have already occurred. And you think about today, people have the ability to go in and go into vacation rental websites and be able to see what's expected and what's available. And so the average consumer today really has a bigger expectation now. They're much more educated about what they would expect to see. And you guys are sort of bringing that into the planning process, aren't you?
Yes, we're trying to, give it a facelift. I think everyone could agree that there's been some much needed renovations and repairs, but I'm telling you, if you hadn't already checked out cabins 8 and 12, the freshly renovated cabins at Roosevelt, you're missing out. They are incredibly modern. I mean, like 5-star type hotel accommodations here. And on top of that, you wake up in the morning and you're right on the Shadow Lake.
Yeah, tough situation. I would assume that the availability of those particular cabins has gone down dramatically just because people now are aware of it. But yes, we want that to be the case across the state of Mississippi with state parks, and with the leadership of the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks and the commission and support from the legislature and people like Sarah working in the trenches to help kind of bring it all together and help us realize the potential and make the most of the money that's being made available to us. We're going to be able to reach those goals. Hey, when we come back, we'll talk about what is it that made those couple of demonstration projects so special, and how do we want to roll that out to other state parks as we go forward, as we continue our conversation with Sarah Caylor, who's an economic development specialist with the Mississippi State Parks. We'll see you after this.
I said 3 Mississippi to this land called home. I'll breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on, I'll carry on, Mississippi.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk, Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. I love meeting dedicated employees of the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. I can't get enough of it. I mean, one of the real benefits to having the opportunity to do Super Talk Outdoors is the opportunity to meet people like my current guest, Sarah Caylor. And, again, I mean, there are around 200 people in that building right now, Sarah. Yeah.
It's a pretty big agency.
And then scattered all over the state, people working in the field, working in state parks, working across a wide range of professions focused on enhancing the outdoor enjoyment we have here in the state. And it shouldn't be surprising, actually, that there would be a economic development specialist with the Mississippi State Parks. It would only make sense that they would do this because as more and more money flows from the legislature to upgrade and really maximize this incredible capability that we have. I say capability because the reality is our forefathers were smart in setting aside so much public land for us to be able to enjoy. It comes in different forms: wildlife management areas, of course, through the state parks. And, we've got to be focused constantly on what we can do to enhance that. So when you think about quantitative analysis that you're bringing to the table related to the state parks, kind of give people a feel for what it is you're doing.
Yeah, so part of my job is to assess the feasibility, facilities and amenities of different programs, basically assess whether or not they are sustainable or whether they need to help with continued investments. Occasionally I write grants and help my social media team strategize with content releases, but the data analysis part, I mean, goodness, I host stakeholder meetings and we collect data through community members to see like, hey, if I think a water park or something would be a good investment at this park, and I just plant that at your park without asking your community members, it's not going to be widely accepted. So that's where this analysis comes in. Like, I'm going to bring all these major community holders together, or community stakeholders, together, and get their input. What do you think this area needs? What do you think this area can support? Is it playgrounds? Is it a zip line? I mean, that's kind of out there, but who knows, maybe one day. But yeah, just take it all in, identify trends, see what's worth our time and energy.
Yeah, I've had, as you know, I had a recent conversation with Stu Rayburn from down here at Buccaneer, and I've had the leader of Clarko on and others as well. Each of these leaders in those specific state parks, they're super. Paul B. Johnson State Park, of course, where I grew up. I literally grew up in Paul B. Johnson State Park. We used to go park our not motorhome, but it was a Holiday Rambler trailer there. My family, we cooked a lot of hot dogs and roasted a lot of marshmallows on the campfire next to our place up there, and I caught a bunch of fish with cane poles in that lake. But when you talk to them, you really get a sense of the number of people that generationally, I mean, I can remember specifically as it relates to Clarko, the number of generations that have family reunions and family events there. It's state parks are part of their heritage, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like, each park has its own distinct, more or less, vibe to it. If I do something well at Buccaneer, it may not go over as well at Caylor, but as you had mentioned, both of those park managers are great and super involved in their communities.
So there's renovations that are ongoing as we speak, but those parks are still open. Why don't you kind of give us a feel for that?
Yeah, so I definitely meant to stress this. So let's see, Roosevelt, Paul B. Johnson, and Percy Quinn are shut down for camping renovations, unfortunately. However, this is a great opportunity if you want to still go there and check out our day use facilities. All of our day use facilities are still open. I was out at Roosevelt last week on a forage hunt with the Central Mississippi Mushroom Group, and we went out there and hiked, at least 3 or 4 miles, had predominantly the whole park to ourselves. And honestly, if you wanted to go take your boat on the water right now, you're probably out there to yourself.
Wow, that's really cool. You know, one of the things I remember about various conversations I've had is the role that volunteers play in the parks. We have so many. You guys even have park internships available, don't you?
Yes, that's something new that we just rolled out with. So if anyone has any students or people working on a gap year in their education who want to become an outdoor recreational professional, I highly encourage them to apply. It's on our website, mdwfp.com. I know our museum has a couple of openings for those programs too, but I'm really interested in some new park internships. Also, you mentioned volunteerism. I haven't unleashed it yet, but come July 2024, I will have some volunteer opportunities statewide for like trail maintenance, leading guided hikes, pressure washing. Honestly, I think pressure washing is fun. So if you want to come out here and do it with me, sign up July 2024.
Well, listen, it's really, Sarah, it's really exciting to hear what's happening at our state parks. I don't think there's anyone in Mississippi that's not been touched in some positive way by the state parks. And you know, the natural beauty is there. Now the physical improvements, the structures and all that, there's a plan to really take that to the next level. And I think that's so exciting. So thanks for the role that you're playing. You did, by the way, you did a terrific job today. You have a radio voice, so to speak, and it's been a pleasure to get to know you.
Awesome, Ricky. Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it today.
You bet. I enjoyed getting to know you too. Listen, have a great week. Always stay safe when you're in the outdoors. God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Mississippi.